Welcome to Nasdaq Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, global markets reporter at Nasdaq. How will COVID-19 impact the global socioeconomic transition? Dr. Indranil Ghosh, he's the author of Power, Prosperity, A Citizen's Guide to Shaping the 21st Century, joins me to answer that question and what we will look like on the other side. Doctor, it's great to have you with us as always. And it seems as if sustainable development challenges and COVID-19 could potentially impact progress.
Yes, but actually a crisis is a terrible thing to waste. And I think there could be a silver lining in that some of the sustainable challenge issues around social development could take a step forward. So one of the charts that I always find very interesting to look at is the one which shows over the last 20 years, the cost of manufactured goods or merchandise like clothing and cars and electronics has gotten cheaper in real terms. So stuff has gotten cheaper. But when you look at the cost of housing and healthcare and education, these have gotten massively more expensive. So life has gotten more expensive. And when you factor in that over that time, the wages for median and lower income workers have stagnated, people came into this crisis without much of a safety net. And so it's been obviously necessary to send them a lifeline through the big stimulus packages. But looking forward, with aging populations in most of the developed world, including the US, there'll be fewer working age people to fund these very expensive social services, you could call them. And so there's really an absolute need to build an innovation and efficiency into the provision of these services. And I think with the backs to the wall, things will start happening now. And we're seeing things like remote learning becoming much, a bigger opportunity, lots of people participating in that. Remote working will lead to a restyling of the office and potentially relieve stress on real estate and real estate prices in densely populated cities. So I think there are many changes afoot which would help change this, escalating cost of living expenses and be a positive thing in terms of sustainable development on the social side.
How will globalization look on the other side of COVID-19? Do you think we'll have that rush to go back and globally be dialed in together? Because that really was a big trend prior to COVID-19. That's one of the reasons why goods were less expensive, because we were able to manufacture globally and all of our businesses have become international as well.
Well, even in 2019, the flow of manufactured goods had actually been slowing down. And if you look at this chart where we see that in 2020, post the COVID crisis beginning, growth of trade has actually gone into negative territory. So trade is actually shrinking in goods. And I don't see that reversing necessarily so quickly, because with the desperate situation in terms of job creation and a push towards greater resilience in supply chains, I think there'll be a lot of countries and companies looking to reshore manufacturing for strategic reasons, so that there's no sort of supply shortages if there are future crises. And also countries, looking to create jobs back home. So we see in Japan, for example, part of their stimulus package is to provide loans and support to manufacturing companies to reshore their operations from China back to the Japanese mainland. And I think that we'll see other types of trends like this playing out. So I don't necessarily see such a big bounce back. And if you think back to 9/11, for example, it took air passenger traffic 4 years to bounce back to its previous levels before the attacks on the Twin Towers.
Yeah, it certainly is going to take a little bit of time to readjust to what our new normal is. Now, what about the role of government? Do you think that's going to change? So, as an example, in the US, there's many people who reject socialism, but seem to be embracing all of the bailout money and all the support that the government is lending. Even today, our administration is looking to look at social media companies even more and perhaps put some regulation behind that. It's not typical that we want as much government involvement, but it sounds as if that trend might be switching a bit.
Well, I think the American people are right to reject socialism because that's never really worked. But that being said, I think we do need smart government, and government that's lean but catalytic. And what do I mean by that? So I think government does need to come in and provide protection in times of crisis. And so it's very appropriate that we have a stimulus package that is providing a lifeline to people and businesses, particularly small businesses. But soon that's going to have to transition into job creation. which is a very different set of measures where we have to find, more productive fiscal measures that, maybe support the development of new green infrastructure, provide, financial support to get new businesses created. So this is going to be a new type of program where we're trying to create jobs through a different set of fiscal programs. And I think that's much more progressive, and it's not socialism. The other thing that I think we need to do in many countries is take a leaf out of Singapore or some of the Middle East countries, where they have large pools of government savings effectively laid out for investments, long-term investments. So sovereign wealth funds, sovereign development funds. And countries like Chile, for example, have stabilization funds. So we need a different set of financial tools by government where funds are available for short-term crises, but also available for long-term development of infrastructure like 5G, development of new systems for education and healthcare, which are much more efficient, as we talked about earlier.
Yeah, you can certainly see that what Singapore has done with the resources that it has. And I also think people need to understand civics in general to move forward as well. All right, let's wrap up with the impact of work from home and digitization. You had touched on that before, but do you think that will be a trend, almost like the airlines will forget what it's like to have work from home? Or do you think digitization with companies is something that's here to stay as we move forward?
I think it's definitely here to stay, because I think with this crisis, with the loss of demand, companies are going to be forced to try to compress their costs. And one of the easiest places to look, especially for talent-heavy companies, is real estate costs. And if you can actually cut that down significantly by having people work remotely, maybe come to the office for collaboration and innovation and other sort of more productive uses of the time, but you do their mundane sort of routine daily work at home, there's a great cost advantage there. But I think that actually has a lot of follow-on effects in society, because if that relieves some of the pressure on real estate in dense cities, it means, and people don't feel tied to be in the city to work, at their job, there could be a flow back to suburbs and rural areas, which could be revitalized with, those new inhabitants and, the wealth that they bring with them, and also relieve the pressure in the city to allow, middle-income, workers to move in and be close to jobs where they have to be physically present to do them.
Yeah, that's an excellent point that you raised there. Thank you so much for joining us on Trade Talks.
It's a pleasure. Thank you, Jill.
All right, and thanks for joining me. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq.